Greetings, Charger fans, and welcome to the Charger Podcast. This is podcast number 3, and I know you might be saying, well, what happened and why is it taking so long? Well, that is a very good question, but I don't know that I have a good answer for that other than I get busy and haven't gotten back to it, but doesn't mean that haven't been important things going on, so I'm going to try to bring you up to date. The last thing I talked about, I believe, in podcast number 2, or one of the main things I talked about was the grant that we had applied for in order to receive some funds to do construction for our district to make some expansions. And by the way, this time on the podcast, I'm just going to kind of be winging it. I haven't really written anything out to read. So there's going to be mistakes and I'm going to misspeak, and I'm just going to leave it all in there and post it as it comes to me. I've thought about this. It would be a lot easier if I had somebody here to have a conversation with. So maybe I'll try to do that in a future podcast to see if I can arrange to make that happen. But I have some important information I want to share today in this podcast. And so back to the grant application, we did complete it on September 30th. However, we learned in October that we did not receive the grant we had applied for. They told us that that particular grant, really the target of that was more toward ISDs and some of the work that they do, and literally all of the grant funds that were awarded after September 30th went to 5 different ISDs, intermediate school districts. And so, however, we were informed that there is a grant application that opened about 2 weeks ago that is more up our alley, what we're looking to do. It's specifically money the state has set aside to grant school districts that are trying to consolidate their buildings. It's targeted toward districts that have a sort of a high level of free and reduced school lunch, which we do, and also targeted at districts that have declining enrollment, which unfortunately we do. And so we fit their priority points, and so we have completed the application that was submitted on Friday, and we're very hopeful that we will receive a grant. It all depends on how many others apply and what the quality of their applications are compared to our application, and we will wait to find out. Probably could be a couple of months before we will know the results of that application. So we're continuing to pursue every option that we have that comes available for funding the difficult projects that or the difficult repairs and other things that we need to take care of. So I'm also realizing I didn't switch chairs. My chair is kind of squeaky. So if you hear some squeaks, just please excuse that. I'll try to sit still. We recently began our meetings of our facility steering committee, and our facility steering committee is a collection of between 15 and 20 members of the community that are meeting regularly. Our first meeting was December 5th in order to represent the community and help fashion the direction for our school district's facilities. What should our facilities look like going forward? And I have posted all of the documents from that facility steering committee meeting. Everything I shared with them has been posted on our school website. If you go to our school website and go to the About page for the school district, right on the main home page, you will see Facility Steering Committee listed, or it might just say Steering Committee. And click on that link, and there will be a folder in there that you can open that has all of the documents that I shared with them. So one of the things I want to do today, or the main thing, is to kind of go through with you some of the information that I shared with the steering committee. I'm not going to stretch it out for 90 minutes as the meeting we had with them took, but I'm going to give you kind of a summary, and then you can look over the documents yourself, and so that you're up to date. I told the steering committee everything we do is going to be open and transparent, public information, so everyone in the community can be part of this and know what's happening with the school district. The purpose of the steering committee, as I told them, was to help the district address some of our current issues that we have, problems we have with our facilities, and then develop a plan for the future of our facilities, not just for next year, the year after that, but longer term, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, whatever the committee believes is appropriate, so that we are working consistent with a plan always to try to improve things and keep our district viable. You probably know the state as a whole is going through a decrease in enrollment. Our entire state has lost population. We've lost representatives in Congress because of that population loss, and Union City is not immune to that. So, like the other small communities around us, we are losing population. I will be honest, there are some communities that are gaining population, but those are typically larger communities, more urban communities. There seems to be somewhat of a migration in that direction. When people consider where to move or where to land when they do come to Michigan, they look for the best facilities, resources, access to things. And so many times they are selecting larger cities than Union City. I know that Village Manager Chris Mathis and the Village Council have done a tremendous job to make Union City attractive small town, and we have drawn people here because of that. And I've talked with Chris about wanting to support the village's efforts in whatever way the school can to help attract families to Union City, because one of the problems is our enrollment. And I shared a couple of documents with the steering committee related to enrollment. One of them is called an enrollment summary, and you'll find it online. And it shows that our enrollment back in 2002 of our students was 1,227. We had 1,227 students in our school district in 2002. And yet here we are in 2023, so that's 21 years later, we were at 927. This year we were at 911 on count day. And so we've lost about 300 students out of our 1,200, so that's 25% of our students. And one question that always comes up, and it's a valid question, is it because of school of choice? Are we losing students to other school districts? And the answer to that is both yes and no. On balance, school of choice has been good to Union City schools. We have far more students who enroll here from other districts than that leave here and go to other districts. So if we didn't have school of choice, we would actually have fewer students in our district than we do today. We have just over 200 students this year out of our 911 are school of choice students. So that means it's just over 700. Actually, it's probably about 705, something like that, of our students actually live in the school district. We estimate it's not as easy for us to find out how many resident students we have that go elsewhere. We have to kind of wait a year and look through data of neighboring districts and tease out from their data that's posted online how many of our students are enrolled there, but the numbers come out to roughly about 140 students each of the last few years. So on balance, we have usually somewhere between 40 and 60 students who actually more who actually come into our district than that leave our district. We get most of our students from neighboring schools that are smaller than us. We get a large number from Athens and Tekonsha. We get over 100 students from just those two districts alone. We do lose a few students to Athens and Tekonsha. We get a fairly good number from Colon. We do get students from larger districts like Coldwater and Harper Creek, though not very many, and we lose more students to those school districts than we bring in. So students and their parents, they pursue opportunities for their children, whether it be better academic programs, more advanced classes, some advanced placement classes that we don't offer, more access to newer facilities, swimming pools, etc., higher level athletic teams, theater programs, whatever it might be. That's typically where we do lose some students. But for similar reasons, we gain students from smaller districts. So we really try to keep our programs to be as good as we can, to enhance our programs, to offer special programs, to have some drama programs that we can offer. We have some after-school clubs. We keep our music programs going. We try to do things to attract students here. We try to keep our athletic teams competitive, to keep our facilities excellent, which that's one of the things we do have is very good athletic facilities, thanks to the field house that was donated to us just over 20 years ago, and also thanks to the football stadium and baseball facilities that we have, two of the best around. And so we do try to provide attractive resources for our students. And it's very important that we worked hard to improve our academic classes, and along with that, the academic facilities that we can offer to our students. So I presented those two enrollment documents to the Facility Steering Committee. I also shared with them the results of the facility study that we had done by Chrisman and C2AE, where they went through and examined all of our facilities and advised us on what would be the best course of action for us moving forward. They offered us a number of plans for moving ahead. They did suggest that with our declining enrollment, it would be best to combine facilities to reduce from 3 school buildings down to 2 school buildings. That also happens to be in line with the grants that the state is offering, which is to consolidate buildings within districts from a larger number to a smaller number. The rationale is that if we have declining enrollment and we don't need as much space as we have, or maybe we need the space, but not all of the space. For instance, we certainly don't need all of the space that we have in our middle school, but that doesn't mean our elementary and high school are large enough to accommodate adding all of those students to just those 2 buildings. So the state's offering funds to help us renovate buildings, perhaps make small additions to buildings in order to be able to close a facility. And the reason to close a facility, obviously, is if you go from 3 to 2 buildings, your expenses go down. With the renovations, you can improve the efficiency of the buildings, so you'd save on energy, heating, with newer insulation, those types of things. And likely you can save on some resources. You may not need all of the staff you do for keeping 3 large buildings open if you go down to 2 buildings instead. So that's the idea behind this consolidation grants. But our Facility Steering Committee is really taking a look at what is best for Union City Schools. And I've told them I leave all the options on the table, from keeping all of our buildings open to closing all of them and moving into a new K-12 building. I mean, that would run the gamut, and anything in between. And so they're going to go through the process of hearing about the study and what the engineers found when they looked at our building. Our next meeting, the engineers from those companies are going to come and talk to the committee about the specific problems with each building, so the committee has a firm understanding of those. But they did get this report, which does detail some of the costs involved in bringing all the buildings up to date. And there's really, I think, within that, I would say there are 3 ways that the buildings might need to be up to date. The first one being simply structural and mechanical, so that the buildings are sound in their construction. They're not going to fall down. We're not going to have problems with water main leaking like we had last year in our high school, where a pipe broke and we were closed for a day. So structurally sound, that all of our mechanical systems are good, and those types of things. The second way would be, are the buildings sufficient, adequate educationally? Do they provide the types of rooms and resources that we need in terms of being able to conduct the classes that we have? Education's a lot different now than it was when these buildings were built in 1960. A lot of it remains the same. I'm not trying to say that we need to throw out the regular traditional classroom. Of course not. But there are some areas where we would wish that we could redesign some of these spaces if we had the option to. We make the best we can with them, but I think every 70 years it's probably a good idea to take a look at, is the space meeting our needs as best as it could? And I know that there are some areas where we certainly could make some adjustments. Larger than that would be looking at the safety of our buildings and the accessibility of our buildings for our students. We have facilities that in many areas we would like to make safety improvements. I'm not going to go into detail about all of the necessary safety improvements, other than to say things like having a secure entry would be nice, to be able to have a vestibule to hold people before they get into the area where the students are. We have classroom doors that are not designed to meet safety standards of today. They were designed and built for a time period when that probably wasn't, I'm sure it wasn't a great concern. We have other areas in our building that we would like to improve for safety purposes. And we also have accessibility issues. We don't have ADA accessible restrooms for students in our high school, for example. We have had some students in wheelchair. We have a couple of single-use restrooms that are for staff use, but we have the students use one of those. One of those works for wheelchairs, one does not. So we are very limited in our accessibility for staff and students in our high school. We have a little more access in the elementary because of the additions made there, so much of that building has that, but there's a part of it that doesn't. And our middle school would be the same. So all of those are issues that we have, and again, there are more details about those in our facility study. The last thing that I talked about with the steering committee was how do we fund facilities if we decide to make improvements? How do we go about funding them and paying for them? And in order to do that, and I'm sure that many of you understand this process, but I'm sure there are also some of you, there may be some students out there listening to this, who want to understand how schools are built and funded, and so I'm going to give a quick explanation of that. School districts in the state of Michigan are funded The facilities are funded primarily through bond votes. And a bond is essentially a loan that the school district takes in order to provide funds to build a building, which are then paid off over a number of years. So, in a sense, it's like a mortgage that a homeowner might take out. And so, if the district, for example, if our district decided we wanted to borrow, I'm going to use $30 million because that's a study or a number that we had our financial management company give us a calculation for. But $30 million loan would mean that our district would have to pay that $30 million off over, say, a 30-year period with interest, of course, because lenders don't lend money without making something from that. And in order to make payments on that loan, we would tax the property in our school district. So each year our school district taxpayers would pay millage on their home. As you know, a mill is $1 per thousand of state equalized value, the taxable state equalized value on your home. And the calculation our financial management company did said that if we had a bond for $30 million, it would cost our school district, our taxpayers, 7 mills per year initially to pay that off. Now, gradually, as the loan was paid off, the number of mills would go down, assuming that the value of the property in the district goes up. The taxes generated would go up based on that, and so the number of mills levied would go down. But initially, it would be 7 mills, and that's a fairly substantial increase in tax, I realize, for $30 million. But that's kind of the picture about how schools are funded. The only other way that I'm aware of is if we can obtain a grant of some sort, and that's why we continue to look for those. Most of the grants might pay a portion of the cost. They may not pay all of it. But those are the options I'm aware of to fund it. And I did forget, and that's the last thing I'm going to talk about, I promise, and then I'm going to end this podcast. I wanted to talk a little bit about the age of our buildings that we have in the district so that people in the community are aware of them, because you walk in, you may not know the history of each building. The oldest building in the district is actually our elementary school, and the elementary school was initially constructed in 1952. The main portion of the building where you enter through the front and the office, although we've done remodeling over the years and in some improvements, but that main portion that runs north and south was built in 1952. The building was expanded with the east-west hallway, or at least part of that hallway. It was later in the 50s, I believe. Not sure the exact date on that. And then there was a temporary wing added in the late 1960s. And I know that because I was in 4th grade in that temporary wing, 4th and 5th grade. When I went to school there around 1970, 71, maybe it was 72, somewhere in there when I was in 4th and 5th grade. And about that time when I went from the elementary to 6th grade, which at the time was when you started middle school, was in 1972, the taxpayers voted on a bond for Union City schools to build the new middle school. I went to 6th and 7th grade in what was the previous high school, which is where the main apartment building in town is right now. But then the new middle school opened up in the fall of 1975. The bond passed in the 1972, and the building was constructed and opened in 1975. My understanding is that the reason the building is built out of what our facility study engineers told us was what they consider to be light commercial construction techniques and materials, was because the bond that they passed in 1972, I think due to inflation, but I'm sure those of you that were around then can correct me on that, was not sufficient to pay for a structure built out of block, and with more permanent materials like our high school and elementary are built out of. So lighter commercial construction techniques and materials were used to build that building, which is why it actually grades out as the worst building we have in our district and the one most in need of repair. Which I think most people who have had students in that building, or if you've been in that building for a ball game recently, you might realize as you go in that building really is the most in need of repair. Then we have our high school, which opened in 1960, or actually I believe it opened in 1961, and has really only undergone a couple of small changes to it. We added a classroom in the northeast corner at one point. But other than that, the main structure stays about the same, other than replacing some windows and putting in a drop ceiling in places, adding carpeting in the classrooms several years ago. So those types of things. But that was when the high school was built. And the high school does have issues. All of these buildings were built by the taxpayers in this community. People who, much like the steering committee we have now, gathered together and looked at the children of the community and said, we need to provide a facility for them, for our children to grow, to learn, to develop, and become the future, hopefully, residents and citizens in this community to keep Union City strong for the future. And those residents did that back then. The last group was in 1972. That bond was paid off in 2002. Union City has not had a bond passed since 1972. We have had no bond payments on our taxes since 2002. Which has been good for the taxpayer over these years, but I believe we're coming to the point where our buildings need to be addressed in one way or the other. And that's why we're in this process, is to provide for our future, for our children, for all the children in this community. And how we go about that, what direction we take, needs to be decided. We want to get input from the entire community. We're doing that through the steering committee. The members of the steering committee, a list will be posted on the website. I don't think that's on there right now, but I'll make sure to get a list on there within that folder on our website. And you can talk to them. You can reach out to the school and talk to me, talk to any of the administrators in the district. They are all involved and are part of this. Talk to our staff in the district. And there are going to be some surveys that will be done, I'm sure, that the steering committee will want to do that to gather input on how best we can move forward to our future. So I'm going to end it there. I've talked for a long time. I don't know how long it's been, but it's long enough, certainly. If you've listened this far, I thank you for doing so. The next podcast I will probably have sometime after our next steering committee meeting, share with you some of the information that was shared with the members of the committee during that about the facility study and what they found with all of our buildings. And so I look forward to talking to you then, and I hope this has been helpful and informative. If it has been, please send me an email. My email is ckatz@unioncityschools.org. You can also find it on our website. And I look forward to hearing from you. Again, my name is Chris Katz. I'm the superintendent. And I'll end simply by saying, go Chargers.